it's Jessica. Thank you for joining me today. I am going to be playing with a new special from Close to My Heart called Gnomes for Autumn. So these are the papers. You get 2 of each of them in the paper pack, and I just love these patterns on here. You can see the back side of this one does have some gnomes on it, but if you're not into gnomes, then that's the only paper that really has any gnomes on it. The other side is just a basic fall paper, and look at all of these pretty patterns that complete the pack. So you get 6 papers of those, and then there is a sticker sheet, which is really cute. Again, there are a couple of gnomes on there if you are into the gnome thing, but if not, just a really great fall collection. Now I am showing you here in the catalog just very quickly some of the things that go along with this special, which is available through September 30th. There are 2 different stamp sets, a thin cut set that creates that gnome. I love the scrapbooking one here. I'm going to use that on my layout today, as well as these cork shapes of all of these fun adhesive backed leaves. Okay, so I've got 3 3x4 photos of my kids sitting on a giant pumpkin, a little bit more about that later. And I am going to follow a pattern from my Make It From Your Heart Volume 2, Pattern 3. And I'm actually just using the one side of that pattern because this is going to be a single page layout. Now, as far as ink distressing, I usually just take my ink pad and go direct to paper, but I thought, you know what, there are some new colors that came out early for this collection, and I have to set up my foam pads to do my little foam blenders anyway, so I'm going to do a little bit of a different ink distressing here. So I'm just getting my little Ziploc baggies that I use to store these in, labeling them, and then I will add a little bit of ink to my foam head there and just go ahead and edge distress all of my pattern papers, which I have already cut according to that pattern book. So I'll get all of those prepped. And then before I get into my embellishments, I want to just lay things out and get a feel for what it might look like. So the pattern book is telling me to put things together like this. I did modify this piece here and make it just a little bit smaller because my photos were just a little bit smaller than the ones that showed in the book. But everything else is exactly the same. I really love that pattern piece there that has the leaves and the pumpkins and the cute little squirrels on it. And then I've got my 3 photos, and I'm just going to arrange them in the order of my kids' ages. So we'll get that like that. And then I have a couple of different title options here on the sticker sheet. Some of them are really cute, and I'm not sure yet which ones I'm going to use, but I am thinking my title will go down here in the bottom spot. I am leaning towards this sentiment from the Scrapbooking stamp set. It says Autumn Splendor. Another option does say Happy Harvest. I like both of those, but I think I'm going to go with the Autumn Splendor. So just something to keep in mind as I move forward. I want to make sure that when I do glue things down that I leave myself enough space to stamp that. The stamp set does come with some coordinating thin cuts, and so I'm going to go ahead and create a bunch of leaves and pumpkins and sunflowers and get those all created so that I can figure out how I'm going to put them on my page. All right, so I'm using that same foam blending tool, only I have a little sanding disc that attaches to the bottom. This thing is awesome. Now, I was actually inspired to do this part here from a video that Erin Jacobson recently posted from Crafty Concepts with Erin, and she was using this exact same stamp set, and rather than coloring in the pumpkins and the leaves, she just took a sanding block and she was roughing up her cardstock before she stamped those images on. And it just gave it a really nice detail and fun look. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that same thing because I love the way that it looked on her project. So I'm just taking that little sanding disc and I'm scrubbing it over my cardstock, and then off camera I'm going to use my thin cuts to die cut out a bunch of those pumpkins and leaves and a couple of sunflowers as well. So those are all prepped, and then they just need to be stamped. So usually when I do something like this, if I have a whole bunch of the same thing, I like to kind of lay them out in groups, and then I'll just start with one stamp, pull it off my carrier sheet there, and then just go stamp, 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 stamp down the row until I have created a whole bunch of die cut images. I am going to use my archival black just because it's a really nice dark black ink, and I'm not planning on doing any coloring with these images. If I were, then I would use intense black, but these ones I did that sanding, and so that's going to be the coloring for me. Now, I don't know about you guys, but with flower die cuts, sometimes it can be a little tricky to line up all of those petals or leaves and make sure that you're stamping it correctly. So one thing I like to do is just take any of the cuts that I have made, make sure that they're all facing the same direction, and then I will take my stamp and just kind of rotate it until I find exactly where that matches. And then I'll pick it up with my black and make sure to leave that die cut back down in the same spot. And then that way I already know that things are lined up when I go to stamp, and I don't need to ink up my stamp and then twist, twist, twist and look for where all my petals are going to line up. So I've gone ahead and finished prepping all of those, and then I am just adhering all of my pieces down. Again, trying to make sure that I remember to leave myself enough space down there for my title. I am using my T-square ruler hooked to the edge of my Versamat just to help get everything down straight. You know, I did not have a T-square ruler until just, I mean, it was not that many years ago. And I've been scrapbooking for a really long time. And when I got my first one, it was like a little $5 cheapy one from Amazon. I was like, where has this been my entire life? It really makes scrapbooking and card making so much easier. So if you are new to scrapbooking, or even if you were like me and you're a seasoned scrapbooker, but you don't have something like that in your stash, I highly recommend getting yourself a T-square ruler to help put everything down straight. I did upgrade to this one here from Close to My Heart, which I do love because it's magnetic, and so those two parts kind of snap apart. It makes it really easy to store it, and it does also have some holes in it if you like to do any kind of stitching, so you can like use those holes as a guide to poke things through with a piercing tool onto your project. And it also extends the entire way across my Versamat. So whereas my other little $5 one from Amazon didn't always extend across the page, this one does. So again, just my bit of advice, I really love having that T-square ruler, and now I've got everything down straight. Okay, before I stamp that, I'm thinking I want to add just a little wash of color behind it to help it kind of stand out a little bit. And I don't know, it's really stark white down in that bottom corner. So I wish that I had some shortbread ink, which is one of the colors in this pattern paper, but I don't. So I am reaching for an older one called Almond. It's just a really light brown, and I think I'm going to test it out here. I think that's going to work out just fine. It does look a little dark, so I'm kind of tapping some of it off on my scrap piece of paper first before I start putting it onto my page. But I'm just going to put a little wash of soft brown color there before I stamp that title down. And now I am ready to do the fussy part. This for me is sometimes the stressful part of scrapbooking, is trying to figure out how to put all of my embellishments down and what's going to go where. So I did definitely cut a lot of this out because it was a lot of fussing. I'm sure you guys have been there before too, right? But I am definitely thinking about that visual triangle. So I'm going to have a cluster here on the bottom of my right photo. I'm going to do another cluster up top above my left photo, and then I'm going to use where that title is as another place for an embellishment point. So that way I have a triangle by the time all is said and done. And I did take a couple of these die cuts because I made quite a few, and some of them I did stack together and glue together. So that way they are more than one layer of cardstock thick. And I have some varying layers of dimension going on. So some things will be kind of flat to the page. Some of my die cuts are popped up just a little bit more because they have a few layers on them. And then I did use a little bit of foam tape on some of the very top pieces once I figure out exactly where everything is going to go. But I didn't really do any coloring, like I said. The only thing I did do later was take a brown marker and just fill in the stem of that pumpkin in the top left because it was kind of bothering me. But otherwise, I just let the sanding and the cardstock kind of be the entire die cut. All right, and then I was like, oh, I don't want to forget about all of those stickers on the sticker sheet. So I did bring that in and grab a few stickers. I like to stick them to the anti-static pouch just to pull the adhesive off the back so that way I can play around with them first before I commit. And there is this really fun tag here that's got a couple of journal lines on it and then one of those cute pumpkins. And I wish I would have thought of that before messing with that one cluster there, because then that throws everything off and I got to figure it all out over again. But I do manage to work in this tag, and I just had minimal journaling to add to this page. So I think that this would be perfect for that. So these pictures are actually from my in-laws' house. They always grow some pumpkins, and then that's where we get our pumpkins every fall. And this particular year, they had the biggest pumpkin that they have ever grown. And so naturally, we had to put the kids on top of it and take a picture. And it was crazy because later we took this pumpkin home and had it at our house. My husband and I went away for the weekend, and when we came back, the pumpkin was like partially rolled down our front yard, and we have a really large front yard. It looked like some teenagers had tried to get up to no good, but then realized how heavy that pumpkin was and that they couldn't actually take it anywhere or even pick it up to smash it, and so they just sort of left it there. It was like in a really weird spot in our front yard, and that actually prompted us to get a Ring doorbell, because we were like, what's the mystery of this pumpkin? What happened here? We were like dying to know, but it was a really big pumpkin and very hard to move. Okay, I said before I was inspired to do my sanding on the cardstock by Erin Jacobson over at Crafty Concepts with Erin. She always ties a little thing like this through her tag, so I thought I'm going to go ahead and do the same. And then I'm going to bring in as my last little bit of embellishment these cork leaves. I love these. They're not too thick if you are worried about bulk on your pages. But they are really cute. So I'm just gonna kind of scatter them around my 3 embellishment clusters, tucking them in. That was one thing that I was keeping in mind when I was putting the foam tape behind those die cuts, or stacking up a couple of layers of cardstock. I knew that I was going to come in with these leaves later and want to tuck them underneath, and so that way I had a little bit of height and I was able to wiggle them under there. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind when I was doing my clusters earlier. This one little leaf, I thought I'm going to use him kind of like a gem, and he's not going to be attached to this cluster up here. I'm just going to kind of stick him up in the white space. Later, I wasn't sure if I loved that, but you'll have to let me know what you think, but I did kind of do that. And then I couldn't find a way to do it again in another place without it looking a little weird, so just that one leaf is kind of off in space by himself. And then the final thing I'm going to do to my page here is add some liquid glass to the center of my sunflowers. I love this. I've been trying to use my liquid glass more often and be really intentional about it, because it is such a fun accent. It just, when it dries, and it does take a little while to dry, it just leaves this clear finish and a lot of dimension. It just looks like a little pop of plastic over something. So a fun way to make the centers of the sunflowers stand out. And that's going to be it. So I really love this fall collection. I definitely have a lot of photos to scrapbook, and I like how it has a couple of options. There are just some neutral patterns on there with some fun fall colors. Plus, if you're into the gnomes, which I know are really popular right now, again, there are a lot of gnome options between the stickers and the one side of the paper, and even that set of thin cuts that you could get to create the cute gnome girl. If not, it's just a fall collection. So I hope you guys have been inspired and that you have enjoyed watching. I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Happy crafting. Bye.